Hello, sports fans. Welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to go over my Week 12 college football predictions. So last week in Week 11, I had a pretty good week going 11-3, and that brings my record on the season to 158-43. So kicking things off this week with a couple games we have on Friday, starting off with Clemson at Louisville. So Louisville is 7-2 and coming in off an upset loss against Cal, and that loss really hurts their chances of making the college football playoff because it's their second conference loss, and they're now very unlikely to make the ACC total game. But Louisville, they know to try to bounce back against a Clemson team that was my preseason pick to win the national championship. But obviously, that is aged terribly. It's Clemson's 4-5. But Clemson, they're still a talented team, and I think this game could be pretty good. But on the offensive side of the ball for Louisville, they've been pretty good, scoring 32.9 points per game, and they've got a good balance between the run and the pass. Although Louisville, they will be without one of their best offensive playmakers in running back Isaac Brown. But the Louisville offense, they know face a Clemson defense that really hasn't been that great, especially against the pass, as they're allowing 22.4 points per game and nearly 250 passing yards per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for Clemson hasn't been that great either, as they're scoring 28 points per game, and they face a very solid Louisville defense that's allowing 21 points per game. But this is a game that I definitely could see going either way because, as I said before, Clemson's still a very talented team. But I'm going to take Louisville to get the win. I wouldn't be shocked to see the upset, but I'm going to take Louisville with the win 28-24. Next game, also on Friday, we've got Minnesota at Oregon. So Oregon is now 8-1 after a nice win over Iowa last week, and they face a Minnesota team that's pretty solid as they're 6-3. But on the offensive side of the ball for Oregon, they've been great, scoring 38.7 points per game, but they haven't been playing as well recently, which is 18 points last week and 21 the game before that. And I could see their offensive struggles continuing because they face a Minnesota defense that is pretty solid, but I do think Oregon will eventually figure things out offensively. And then on the flip side, the offense for Minnesota is not good, as they're scoring just 23.8 points per game, and they don't have to face any elite Oregon defense that's allowing just 13.8 points per game. But I'm going to take Oregon to get the win here. Even if their offense is another bad game, I don't really think they would have to score much to get the win because I think their defense will dominate. But I do think Oregon does get the offense going, and I've got Oregon with the win, 34-10. And moving to the rest of the games all on Saturday, beginning with Indiana hosting Wisconsin. So Wisconsin's 3-6, and they have not been good, but they just upset Washington last week, winning 13-10. And maybe there's a chance they can pull off the upset once again, especially because Indiana didn't play that well last week, beating Penn State by just 3. But while Wisconsin did get the upset win last week, their offense was still terrible, scoring just 13 points, and their leading passer was their punter who threw for 24 yards. And now, Wisconsin's offense already isn't good, and they have to face an Indiana defense that's actually second best in the country, allowing just 12.1 points per game. But I really don't see Wisconsin doing anything offensively. Now, on the flip side, the Indiana offense is one of the best in the country, although they didn't have their best game last week, scoring just 27 points. And they faced Wisconsin defense that's been pretty solid, as they're allowing 22.3 points per game on the season. Well, I have Indiana winning this game fairly easily. I guess there's a chance Wisconsin gets the upset if they can keep this game insanely low scoring, but I just don't think that happens with Indiana's offense being the highest scoring offense in the country. So I'm going to take Indiana to get the win here very easily by a score of 34-3. Next game, we have Notre Dame at Pitt. This is a big game for the college football playoff race, as Notre Dame is currently 7-2 and ranked 9th, but they obviously need to win out to make the playoff. And they got a pretty tough game this week, as they have to go to Pitt, and play a Pitt team that's also still alive in the playoff race, as Pitt is also 7-2. And this is still a pretty big game for Pitt, although head coach Pat Narduzzi doesn't think so, because he doesn't care if they lose this game by 100, as long as they win their next 2 conference games, which, I mean, technically he's not wrong, because this game doesn't mean a ton, or really anything when it comes to the conference standings, but I still don't think that's the right way of looking at this game. But I still think this game is going pretty good, and it's one of the better games we have this week. But on the offensive side of the ball for Pitt, they're led by true freshman quarterback Mason Heinchel, who's been great for Pitt since he took over the starting role. As in his 5 starts, Pitt is 5-0, and he's averaging over 300 passing yards per game, and the Pitt offense putting up 40 points per game. But the Pitt offense, they also haven't played very good defenses during that stretch. And they don't get tested this week because they play a Notre Dame defense that's playing really well, as they're giving up just 18.8 points per game on the season. Now, on the flip side, the offense for Notre Dame is also great. They're scoring 38.7 points per game, which ranks 9th in the country, and they're very balanced, with 271 passing yards per game and 194 rushing yards per game. And Notre Dame offense, they face a Pitt defense that's pretty solid, as they're allowing 21.8 points per game, and they're actually really good against the run, as they're allowing just 80 rushing yards per game, which is 3rd best in the country. But the Pitt defense, nothing special against the pass, so I do think CJ Carr could have a big game. But this is a game that I do think will be somewhat close, and I could see this game going either way, but I'm going to take Notre Dame to get the win. I think their offense continues to play well, and I think they throw the ball effectively, and I think the Notre Dame defense continues to play well, and they contain a Pitt offense that's pretty good. But I'm going to take Notre Dame to get the win here very convincingly by a score of 34-20. Next game we have South Carolina at Texas A&M. So Texas A&M is great as they're still undefeated as they're 9-0, and they face a South Carolina team that's been very disappointing as they're 3-6. But South Carolina, they still have some talent. They upset Texas A&M late in the year last year. Maybe they can do it again, although I do think it's a lot less likely this time around. But the offense for Texas A&M is great as they're scoring 37.8 points per game, and they're very balanced between the run and the pass. And then they'll face a South Carolina team that has a pretty good defense as they're allowing 22.1 points per game, although they're not good at stopping the run, allowing over 150 rushing yards per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for South Carolina is really bad. They're scoring just 19.7 points per game, and they face a very solid Texas A&M defense. But I'm going to take Texas A&M to get the win here. While the upset happened last year, I don't think it happens this year. Texas A&M is a lot better than they were last year. South Carolina is a lot worse than they were last year. A&M is also at home. I've got them with the big win, 35-7. Next game, we have Michigan against Northwestern in Wrigley Field. So Michigan is still in playoff contention as they're 7-2, and they face a Northwestern team that's not that bad as they're 5-4. And I think this game could be somewhat interesting. The Michigan offense hasn't been playing that well recently, as they only scored 21 last week against a bad Purdue defense. And in conference play, Michigan is averaging under 24 points per game. But even though Michigan has struggled to put up some points, they've still been running the football really effectively, as they're averaging 223 rushing yards per game. Now, the Michigan offense is without their top running back in Justice Haynes, but backup running back Jordan Marshall has done a great job filling in for him, as in his last 3 games, Marshall's run for 428 yards and 3 scores. But the Michigan offense, they face Northwestern defense that is actually pretty solid, as they're allowing just 19 points per game, but they have struggled to stop the run. Well, very similar to Michigan's offense. But on the other side of the ball, the offense for Northwestern is not good. They're scoring just 22 points per game, and they don't face a very good Michigan defense, allowing just 17 points per game. But I definitely think this is going to be a lower scoring game because both these teams are good defensively, and I could see the upset happening, but I'm going to take Michigan to get the win. I think their ability to run the football with Jordan Marshall is the difference. I think Marshall's got a big game, and Michigan wins by a score of 24-13. Next game, we have South Florida at Navy. This is a pretty big game for the Group of 5 playoff race. South Florida is currently 7-2, and the highest ranked Group of 5 team, and Navy is also 7-2, but they haven't been as great recently. And while they are 7-2, I think they've really started the year beating up on a lot of bad teams. And I do think they're a solid team, but as they've played better teams recently, we've kind of seen who they really are. As 2 weeks ago, they lost 31-17 in North Texas, and last week they lost 49-10 against Notre Dame. But this is also a pretty good matchup for South Florida, so I don't really think this game is going to be that close. As the offense for South Florida is great, scoring 42 points per game, and quarterback Byron Brown has been on another level recently, as he's had at least 1 passing touchdown and 1 rushing touchdown in every conference game this season. And Byron Brown in the South Florida offense, they don't face a Navy defense that isn't the greatest, allowing over 26 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for Navy is also pretty solid, as they're scoring 32 points per game. But quarterback Blake Horvath didn't play last week, and he might also miss this week's game. And the Navy offense, they also match up against a South Florida defense that is pretty good, especially at stopping the run. Well, I'm going to take South Florida to get the win here. I think this is a great matchup for them. I don't really think this game is that close. I think it's closer than last week for Navy, but I still think it's a blowout. I've got South Florida 37-14. Next game, we have Arizona at Cincinnati. This is another pretty interesting game. Cincinnati is currently 7-2 and coming off a bye after a bad loss to Utah, but they're still alive in the Big 12 title race, which means they're still alive in the college ball playoff race. But Cincinnati, they don't face an Arizona team that's pretty solid as they're 6-3. And I think this game should be pretty good. On the offensive side of the ball for Cincinnati, they're pretty good, scoring 35.6 points per game, and they're good through the air and on the ground. But then they'll get a pretty tough matchup this week against an Arizona defense, scoring just 19.9 points per game. And they're pretty good at stopping the pass, but they can't stop the run. Now, on the other side, the offense for Arizona is also good, as they're scoring 33 points per game, and quarterback Noah Fifita has been having a nice season, with 23 touchdowns and 4 receptions. And the Arizona offense, they don't face a Cincinnati defense that's okay, allowing about 22 points per game, but they also struggle to stop the run, and they're decent at the pass. But even though both these defenses are pretty good, I do think we're going to see a lot of points scored in this game. But this game, I really have no idea who to pick, and I wouldn't be shocked at all to see the upset. So I'm going to take Cincinnati just because they're at home, by a score of 31-27, but this game is pretty much a coin flip. Next game, we have Oklahoma at Alabama. This is a great game, and this is another big game for the college ball playoff race. As Oklahoma is currently 7-2, and a third loss here would pretty much eliminate them from playoff contention, and Alabama is in the playoff as of now as they're 8-1, and a loss here wouldn't necessarily knock them out of the playoff, but it would make their seeding a lot worse. But this game should be pretty good. And in this game, we've also got a great matchup with the Alabama offense and the Oklahoma defense. But the offense for Alabama, they've been playing pretty well, scoring 32.8 points per game. And quarterback Ty Simpson's been great, with 273 passing yards per game, 21 touchdowns, and just one interception. But the Alabama offense, they have also really struggled to run the football, as they're averaging just 111 rushing yards per game, which is second worst in the SEC. And the Alabama offense, they don't match up against a great Oklahoma defense, giving up just 14 points per game, and they're also pretty good against the pass, allowing just 181 passing yards per game. Now, on the offensive side of things for Oklahoma, they've been pretty solid, scoring 28.9 points per game, and they've been much better recently, and a big reason why is they've started to find the run game. As over their last 3 games, they're averaging over 160 rushing yards per game. And it's really a good thing they've gotten the run game going, because John Mateer hasn't been as good since returning from injury. But the offense for Oklahoma, they face an Alabama defense that is playing pretty well, allowing 17.2 points per game, and they're very good against the pass, but they're not great against the run, as they're giving up 139 rushing yards per game. But this is a really interesting game, and this is a really tough game to predict, because I don't think either team is playing their best football right now, but both teams are still pretty good. But I do think this is going to be a lower scoring defensive game with how good both teams' defenses are, and I think this game really comes down to which offense can make the big plays. And I think that's Alabama. Not only do I think they have the better offense, but I just trust Ty Simpson to come up in the big moments. So I'm going to take Alabama to get the win by a score of 24-20. But again, that can definitely go either way. Up next, we have UCF at Texas Tech. So Texas Tech is coming off a big win over BYU, winning 29-7. And then we fought a letdown again this week. But they should be able to because they play a UCF team that's not great, as they've lost 5 of their last 6 games. But this game could be somewhat interesting, because the Texas Tech offense, they're playing pretty well, scoring 42 points a game, but they face a UCF team that does have a good defense, holding opponents to just an average of 20 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for UCF is not good, as in conference play, they're putting up just 21 points a game, and they're not going to do much against the weak Texas Tech defense. But there's definitely a chance for an upset here if UCF can keep this game close and low scoring, but I just don't think they're going to hold this Texas Tech offense down for 4 quarters. I've got Texas Tech with the win, 31-6. Next game, we have NC State at Miami. So this is another really interesting game. Miami is 7-2, and coming in off a dominant win over Syracuse, although Syracuse is pretty bad. And then I faced an NC State team that's 5-4. And I definitely don't think this is going to be an easy game for Miami, especially because the last time we saw NC State, they upset Georgia Tech, winning 48-36. And I definitely think NC State has a chance to pull off the upset once again. And a big reason why I think they have the chance to pull off the upset is their offense, as obviously they scored 48 last time out against Georgia Tech, and on the season they're scoring 33.2 points per game. Although the NC State offense do get a tough matchup this week against the Miami defense, allowing just 15 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for Miami has been pretty good, scoring 32.9 points per game, and I think they should be able to score a lot this week against NC State defense that's not good, allowing over 30 points per game. But this is another tough game to predict, and a game I can definitely see going either way. I don't really trust NC State because of how bad their defense is, but I also don't trust Miami in the month of November. But I'm going to take Miami to get the win. They're the more talented team. They're at home. I've got them 34-23. Well, this is going to be a pretty good game, and I would not be shocked at the upset. Up next, we have Iowa at USC. This is another big game for the college ball playoff race. As USC, they still have a chance to make the playoff as they're 7-2, but they get a very tough game this week as they face an Iowa team that is 6-3. Now, Iowa, they did lose their 3rd game of the season last week, which probably eliminates them from playoff contention, but they're still a really good team. And this is a really interesting matchup between the USC offense and the Iowa defense. Because the USC offense, they're scoring 39.6 points per game, and they're averaging over 300 passing yards per game. But they face a great Iowa defense that's 6th in the country, allowing just 13.7 points per game, and they're also top 5 against the pass, allowing just 146 pass yards per game. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Iowa offense isn't the greatest, obviously, but they do run the football pretty effectively, rushing for 175 yards per game. And they match up against a USC defense that is allowing 21.8 points per game, but USC's defense isn't very good against the run, so I could see Iowa having some offensive success. But this is another really tough game to predict, another game I can definitely see going either way. I do think USC's offense is good enough to score even against a tough defense, but I could see Iowa State having some success because of their ability to run the football. But in the end of the day, I do think USC is a slightly better overall team, and they're at home, so I want to take them in a lower scoring game, 24-18. But this is another game, the upset definitely a possibility. Next game, we got Duke hosting Virginia. This is another big game. This is a massive game for the ACC title race, as both these teams currently have one conference loss, and the winner of this game is in a great position to make the ACC title game and potentially the college football playoff. But both these teams are also looking for bounce back wins, as Virginia, they were upset by Wake Forest last week, and Duke lost to UConn. Well, this is a really interesting game. The Virginia offense, they've put up some points this season, scoring 34 points per rim, but they have not been as good recently, as over their last 4 games, they're averaging under 20 points per rim. And Virginia could also be without starting quarterback Chandler Morris, who left last week's game with an injury. But the offense for Virginia, they faced a Duke defense that isn't very good, as they're giving up nearly 30 points per rim, and they've given them 82 points over their last 2 games combined. Now, on the offensive side of the ball for Duke, they're also good. They're scoring 35.2 points per rim, and they're led by a great passing game, as quarterback Darian Mensah is fourth in the country with 2,794 passing yards. And the Duke offense, they face a Virginia defense that's okay, allowing 21.6 points per rim and 215 yards per game through the air. Well, this is another game that's very tough to predict, and a game I can definitely see going either way. I think we're going to see a lot of points scored in this game because even though Virginia's defense has pretty good numbers, I still don't think they're that great. And obviously, Duke's defense isn't good, and they don't have good numbers. But this is another game that can definitely go either way. I don't trust Virginia's offense with how they've been playing lately, plus they might be without Chandler Morris. So I'm going to take Duke to get the win, but I wouldn't be shocked to see this game go either way. I've got Duke in a higher scoring game, 30-26. Next game, we got Georgia Tech at Boston College. So Georgia Tech's coming off a bye after their first loss season against NC State, and they're looking to bounce back this week against the Boston College team that is not good. As BC, they've won just one game all year, and that was against an FCS team. But this game not going to be very close. Georgia Tech's offense is great, scoring 36 points a game, and they're going to have a huge game against the Boston College defense, allowing 34.5 points a game, and they also can't stop the run or the pass. And then on the flip side, the BC offense is not good, scoring just 23 points a game, and they face a Georgia Tech defense that isn't the greatest, allowing 23 points a game, but I still think they'll play pretty well against the bad offense. But I don't have a ton to say about this game. I don't think it's that close. Georgia Tech is a much better team. They win 38-14. Next game, we got New Mexico State at Tennessee. So Tennessee is coming off a bye after loss to Oklahoma, and they're looking to bounce back, and they should be able to because they get a very easy opponent this week as they face a bad New Mexico State team that's just 3-6. And this game is not going to be close. Tennessee's offense is great, and they're going to score points, especially against the bad defense. And really, the only thing I'd worry about in this game for Tennessee is how bad their defense is, and if New Mexico State can potentially keep up. But their offense is scoring just 21 points a game. They've got no chance to keep up with Tennessee. I've got Tennessee very big, 45-14. Up next, we got Florida at Ole Miss. So Ole Miss is 9-1, and they don't play a Florida team that is not good, as they're 3-6, and they just got blown out by a bad Kentucky team last week. Now, Florida, they did upset Ole Miss towards the end of the year last year. That was one of the losses that really crushed Ole Miss's playoff hopes, but I don't really think we're going to see an upset this time around. Although it is a fairly interesting matchup. Because the Ole Miss offense is obviously great, scoring 37.5 points a game, but Florida's defense is also pretty solid. But then on the flip side, the offense for Florida is terrible, but they face a Ole Miss defense that has given up some points at times this season. But I still don't really think this game is going to be that close. Florida, they just looked terrible last week against Kentucky, losing, I believe, 38-7. They don't face an Ole Miss team that's really good. This game's not going to be close. Ole Miss wins easily, 35-6. Next game, we got Utah at Baylor. This is another interesting game. Utah is 7-2, and they don't have to go to Baylor, which is not going to be an easy thing. Because Baylor, they're not the greatest team in the world, but they're 5-4, and they've got a good offense, which pretty much makes them capable of winning any game. But I really don't love this matchup for Utah, because really of how good the Baylor offense is. Because Baylor's offense, they're scoring 33.8 points per game, and they've got a great passing game with quarterback Sawyer Robertson, who's top 5 in the country in both passing yards and passing touchdowns. But the Baylor offense, they face a great Utah defense that's allowing just 14.2 points per game, and they're also great against the pass, allowing 156 passing yards per game, which is 6th nationally. Now, on the offensive side for Utah, they're also great. They're actually scoring nearly 40 points per game, and their run game is 3rd best in the country, with 267 rushing yards per game. And I think the Utah offense is going to have a great game, because Baylor's defense is not good, allowing about 30 points a game, and they can't stop the run, allowing 177 rushing yards per game. But this is a game where obviously I can see the upset happening because Baylor can score, and if this game becomes a shootout, I do think Baylor has the advantage with their ability to throw the football downfield. But I'm going to take Utah to get the win. I think their defense is good enough to contain this Baylor offense. I think their offense is a huge game. I've got Utah with the win by a score of 42-24. Moving on, we have UCLA at Ohio State. So Ohio State is great as they're 9-0, and they face a UCLA team that's 3-6. Now UCLA did have that little 3-game win streak a few weeks ago, but that ended when they lost to Indiana by 50. And I think this game is going to be very similar to that game. I think Ohio State wins this game very easily. I don't have a ton to say about this game. Ohio State wins 52-3. Up next, we got Texas at Georgia. And we'll be having a live watch party for this game that will start about 7:30 Eastern Time on Saturday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is another huge game for the college ball playoff race, and there's also a rematch of the SEC championship game from last season. But Texas, they're currently 7-2 and ranked 10th in the playoff rankings, and a loss here doesn't necessarily eliminate them, but it would make it very hard for them to get in. And Georgia, they're currently 8-1, and they wouldn't want to lose this game because obviously they don't want to lose, but they still would probably be in the playoff with a loss. But this is a pretty good game, and it's pretty interesting because I don't think either team is playing their best football, and I don't think either team is elite. They're both good, but not elite. But this game should be pretty entertaining. On the offensive side of the ball for Texas, they've been a little bit disappointing this year, putting up 28.9 points per game, but they did play pretty well last time against Vanderbilt as they scored 34 points. But then it faced a Georgia defense that is still good, although they haven't been quite as good as they've been in years past, as they're allowing 19.8 points per game. And then on the flip side, the offense for Georgia is playing well, scoring 33.4 points per game, and they had arguably their best offensive game of the season last week, as they dropped 41 against Mississippi State. And the Georgia offense has been running the football really effectively, with 197 rushing yards per game. But the Georgia offense, they get a tough matchup this week against an elite Texas defense, allowing just 16.4 points per game. Although Texas' defense hasn't been quite as good recently, as they've allowed 69 points in their last 2 games combined. But Texas defense, they're also really good at stopping the run, as they've got the second best run defense in the country, allowing 78 rushing yards per game. And the Texas defense, they also do a great job at generating pressure on opposing quarterbacks, as they're 34 sacks, tied for second most in the country. But this is a game that I can definitely see going either way. I think we're going to see a lower scoring games. Both of these teams are good defensively, and I kind of like the matchup for Texas, especially defensively, because I think their defense is good enough to shut down this Georgia run game and force Gunnar Stockton to beat them through the air. Now, Gunnar Stockton has obviously improved a lot as a passer, but he's still not the best thrower of the football. But while I do kind of like the matchup for the Texas defense, I still don't trust their offense, especially against a good defense. But this is a game that can definitely go either way. I'm going to take Georgia because they're very hard to beat at home. They've lost one game at home in the last 6 years, I think. But I'm going to take Georgia 27-24, but this game can definitely go either way. And our final game, we've got TCU at BYU. This is another game where there's potential for an upset. BYU is coming off their first loss season as they got destroyed by Texas Tech last week, and they avoid a repeat of what happened last year where they got off to a great start. They were undefeated for the first couple months of the season, and then they lost back-to-back games, which pretty much ended their chances at the college ball playoff. And they can definitely lose back-to-back games again this year because TCU is pretty solid. They're 6-3. But this game should be pretty good. But TCU, they're led by their offense, scoring 33 points per game, and they've got a good pass game with over 300 passing yards a game. But they face a good BYU defense, allowing just 192 passing yards per game and 18.3 points per game. But then on the flip side, the offense for BYU is also good, as they're also scoring 33 points per game, and they're built more on the run, with over 200 rush yards per game. But they don't match up against a TCU defense that isn't the greatest, allowing 24.6 points per game, while their run defense is pretty solid, but they can definitely be beaten through the air. But this game I can definitely see going either way. I do think TCU has the offense to score on this BYU defense, but I just think BYU is the more complete overall well-rounded team, plus they're at home, so I've got them with the bounce back win by a score of 30-23, but another game, upset definitely a possibility. Well, those are my Week 12 college football predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I do my best to put this as often as possible. Be sure to check out the community tab of my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think wins some of these big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to put this as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.